The day my doctor asked me about my sex life, I realized my husband had been punishing me for almost 2 decades, and I had been accepting it like I deserved it. Laura, when was the last time you and your husband were intimate? Dr. Carter didn't look up right away when she asked it. She kept her eyes on the screen, scrolling slowly like she already knew the answer and was just waiting to see if I'd lie. I remember the way my fingers tightened around the strap of my purse. It was such a small thing, but I felt it in my chest, like something inside me had been poked after years of being left alone. I laughed, not because it was funny, because I didn't know what else to do. "Oh, it's been a while," I said. She stopped typing, just stopped. Then she turned her chair slightly and looked at me over her glasses. Not judging, not soft either, just steady. "How long is a while, Laura?" I swallowed. My mouth felt dry all of a sudden. 17 years, I said. The words sounded strange out loud, like they didn't belong to me, like I was talking about someone else's life. Dr. Carter blinked, just once, but it was enough. 17? She repeated quietly. I nodded. My eyes dropped to my hands. I noticed my nails were uneven. I had chewed one down without realizing. "We've been married for over 30 years, I added quickly, like that somehow made it better. It's just, things changed. That was the word I used. Changed, not broken, not destroyed, just changed. But the truth was, nothing had changed. Everything had stopped. She leaned back in her chair, folding her hands together. "Is that by mutual agreement?" she asked. I shook my head before she even finished the sentence. "No," I said, and then, quieter, it was his decision. There was a pause, not an awkward one, a heavy one. Dr. Carter glanced back at the screen, then at me again. I could see something shifting behind her eyes now. Concern, calculation, maybe even pity. "Laura," she said gently, "I'm asking because your test results show some irregularities. Hormonal imbalance, tissue changes, things we usually see in women who have had long-term deprivation of physical intimacy." Deprivation. The word landed harder than it should have. I had never thought of it that way, not as something done to me, more like something I had earned. "I didn't know that mattered," I said. "It does," she replied, "physically and emotionally. Emotionally." I almost smiled at that, because if she had asked me about my emotional state, I wouldn't have known where to begin. 17 years of silence doesn't feel loud. It feels normal, until someone points at it and asks why. She hesitated, then added, "May I ask what happened?" And just like that, I was no longer in that clean, quiet office with sunlight filtering through the blinds. I was back in a different room, a different time, back to the summer when everything ended. I could still hear the screen door slamming, still see the look on my son's face, still feel the weight of my husband's silence pressing down on me like something alive. "I made a mistake," I said finally. Dr. Carter didn't interrupt. "I cheated on him," I continued, the words coming out steadier than I expected. It was 17 years ago. She nodded slowly, like she had heard versions of this before. "And since then?" she asked. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Since then," I said, "he's never touched me again." There it was, the truth, clean, simple, brutal. But even as I said it, something else started to surface, something I hadn't let myself think about in years. Because what Dr. Carter didn't know, what no one knew, was that the night my husband stopped touching me wasn't the beginning of the punishment. It was the continuation of something much deeper. And what I was about to remember was far worse than anything I had confessed out loud. The summer everything broke didn't start with a fight. It started with silence. Ryan had just left for college that August, and the house felt wrong. Not empty exactly, just too still, Too quiet in a way that made every small sound feel louder than it should. The ticking clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator, the way David cleared his throat before speaking, like he was about to say something important, and then never did. We had been married for over 20 years at that point. We knew each other's routines so well we barely needed words. He left for work at 7:30. I left at 8. Dinner at 6, television at 8, bed by 10. It was a good life, a stable life, but somewhere along the way it had stopped being a shared life. I didn't notice it all at once. It crept in slowly, like dust settling on furniture you stop paying attention to. Conversations became shorter, then optional, then non-existent. We weren't fighting. We weren't angry. We were just there. And then Daniel Brooks walked into the faculty lounge. He was new. Fresh energy in a place that had long stopped expecting anything new. Mid-30s, easy smile, sleeves rolled up like he didn't quite believe in formality. He carried a sketchbook everywhere, even to staff meetings, and I remember thinking how strange that was, how unnecessary. And then, one afternoon, he sat across from me at the long table and said, "You look like someone who used to dream bigger than this place." I laughed, a polite, dismissive laugh, the kind you give when someone says something that hits a little too close. "What does that even mean?" I asked. He shrugged, flipping his pencil between his fingers. "It means you don't belong in a room where people are counting down to retirement. I should have walked away right then. I didn't. Because no one had said anything like that to me in years." At home, David noticed changes before I realized I was making them. "You've been staying late a lot," he said one night, not looking away from the television. "End of semester," I replied quickly. "Grading, meetings." He nodded once. No suspicion, no accusation, just acknowledgement. That should have made me feel relieved. Instead, it made me feel invisible. Daniel and I started talking more. At first, it was harmless. Conversations about books, about students, about how the school seemed stuck in time. Then it turned into coffee after work. Walks through the small garden behind the building, lingering conversations in empty classrooms where the sunlight stretched long across the floors. He listened, really listened. One afternoon, he showed me a watercolor painting, a hillside covered in wildflowers, soft and messy and alive. "What do you think?" he asked. "It's beautiful," I said, and I meant it. He held it out to me. "It's yours." I hesitated. "I can't take that." "Sure you can," he said. "It reminded me of you." I remember the way my chest tightened. "Why?" I asked. He smiled, not teasing, not playful, just certain. "Because you look quiet," he said, "but there's something underneath that, like you've been waiting for someone to notice." That was the moment everything shifted. Not when he touched me, not when we crossed a line. That moment. Because he saw something I had spent years pretending didn't matter. And once someone sees you like that, it's hard to go back to being invisible. I told myself it was nothing. Just friendship, just a phase, something that would pass. But it didn't pass. It grew. And with every conversation, every shared glance, every excuse I made to stay a little longer, the distance between me and my husband grew too. The night everything finally collapsed, I told David I had a faculty workshop. I even packed a folder, papers I didn't need, notes I would never use. He didn't question it. "Drive safe," he said, already turning back to the television. I stood there for a second longer than I should have, waiting. For what? I don't know. For him to ask me to stay, for him to look at me, for him to care. He didn't. So I left, and I drove out of the city toward a quiet lake where Daniel said the light was perfect at sunset. I didn't know it yet, but by the time the sun went down that night, My life as I knew it would already be over. The light over the lake that evening was the kind people write poems about, soft gold stretching across the water, everything quiet except for the gentle sound of wind brushing through the trees. I remember thinking, for just a moment, that I felt peaceful. Daniel had set up his sketchbook on a flat rock near the shore, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly messy from the breeze. He looked younger out there, like the world hadn't had a chance to wear him down yet. "Stay there," he said, glancing up at me. "Don't move." I laughed softly. Why? Because the way the light hits you right now. He tilted his head, studying me. It's perfect. No one had ever looked at me like that. Not in years. Not like I was something worth capturing. I stood still, pretending to be amused, but inside something fragile was beginning to crack open. "You don't have to flatter me," I said. "I'm not," he replied without hesitation. "I just tell the truth." The words lingered in the air longer than they should have. We spent the afternoon talking about everything and nothing. Books we loved, places we never visited, the version of ourselves we used to be before life settled into routines we never questioned. At some point, we stopped talking. The sun had dipped lower, the sky turning shades of orange and violet, and the world felt smaller somehow, quieter, like it was holding its breath. Daniel closed his sketchbook and looked at me. "Laura," he said, softer this time. There was something different in his voice, something that made my stomach tighten. I should have stepped back. I didn't. He reached for my hand, slowly, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His fingers wrapped around mine, warm and steady, and for a second, everything in my head went silent. No guilt, no fear, no consequences, just that feeling, the one I hadn't felt in years. "Do you ever think about what your life could have been?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "All the time." He nodded like he already knew that. "We don't have to stay the same people forever," he said. And that's when I knew I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to stop it before it went further, Mom. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It cut straight through everything. My body went cold before I even turned around. Ryan stood a few feet away, frozen in place, his face pale in a way I had never seen before. His eyes moved from me to Daniel, then back to our hands. Still joined, I pulled away instantly like I had been burned. "Ryan," my voice broke before I could finish. Behind him, a second figure stood in the fading light. David. He didn't say anything. He didn't move. He just stood there, his face completely still, eyes fixed on me with a kind of emptiness that was worse than anger. For a second, I thought maybe this wasn't real, that maybe if I blinked hard enough, I would wake up somewhere else, back in my kitchen, back in my life. But Ryan's voice shattered that illusion. "I came home to surprise you," he said, his voice tight, shaking in a way that made my chest ache. "I called you. You didn't answer. I couldn't speak." My mind was blank, scrambling for something that didn't exist. An explanation, a lie, anything. "He asked me to help find you," Ryan continued, jerking his head slightly toward David. "We checked the school, your usual places." Every word felt like another step closing in on me. "And then we found you here." Silence fell again, heavier this time. I looked at David, desperate for something. Anger, yelling, anything that felt human. But there was nothing, just that stillness. He finally turned his head slightly toward Ryan. "Let's go," he said. That was it. No accusations, no questions, no raised voice. Just, let's go. Ryan didn't move at first. His eyes were still on me, searching for something I couldn't give him. "Mom!" he started, but the word collapsed under the weight of everything else. David was already walking back toward the car, Ryan hesitated 1 second longer, then turned and followed. I stood there, completely still, as the sound of their footsteps faded into the distance. Daniel said something behind me. I don't even remember what. It didn't matter, because in that moment I understood something with terrifying clarity. I hadn't just made a mistake. I had destroyed something that would never be rebuilt. And somehow, the worst part hadn't even begun yet. The drive home was so quiet it felt like the air itself had been drained out of the car. Ryan sat in the back seat staring straight ahead, his reflection faint in the window as the last light of the day disappeared into darkness. I could see his jaw clenched, his shoulders stiff, like he was holding himself together by force. David drove, both hands on the wheel, eyes forward, no music, no radio, not even the sound of him clearing his throat. Just silence. I sat in the passenger seat, my hands folded tightly in my lap, fingers digging into each other hard enough to hurt. I kept waiting for him to say something, anything, to yell, to ask, to demand, but he didn't. And somehow, that was worse. Every mile felt longer than the last. The road stretched endlessly in front of us, headlights cutting through the dark, and I realized with a sinking feeling that there was no version of this night that ended well. When we pulled into the driveway, the engine shut off with a soft click. No one moved. For a moment, I thought maybe we would just stay there forever, suspended in that silence. Then David opened his door and stepped out. Ryan followed without a word. I sat there for 1 second longer, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, then forced myself to move. Inside, the house felt exactly the same and completely different. The lights were on. The kitchen looked untouched. The same chairs, the same table, the same life we had built together. But something invisible had shifted. Ryan went straight upstairs. No hesitation, no glance back. His bedroom door closed with a quiet click that echoed louder than it should have. David walked into the living room, loosened his tie, and sat down on the couch, like it was any other night, like nothing had happened. That broke something in me. "David," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't look up. I took a step closer. "Please say something." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a cigarette, and lit it slowly. He hadn't smoked in years. The flame flickered briefly, illuminating his face, and for a split second, I thought I saw something there. Not anger, not sadness, something colder. "How long?" he asked. His voice was calm, too calm. I dropped to my knees in front of him before I even realized I was moving. "I'm sorry," I said, the words spilling out in a rush. "I didn't mean for it to happen, I swear. It just—" "How long?" he repeated, cutting through me like I hadn't spoken at all. My throat tightened. 3 months, I whispered. The number hung in the air between us. "Nothing happened," I added quickly. "We just talked. Stop. One word, sharp, final." He took a slow drag from the cigarette, then stubbed it out in the ashtray with deliberate precision. "Laura," he said, finally looking at me. And I wished he hadn't, because there was nothing in his eyes. No warmth, no familiarity, just distance. "I'm going to give you 2 options," he continued, his tone flat like he was discussing a business deal instead of our marriage. "Option 1, we get a divorce. You walk away with nothing." My breath caught. He didn't pause. "Option 2, we stay married." Hope flickered, weak and fragile. But then, from this moment on, we are not husband and wife. The hope died instantly. "We live in the same house," he went on. "We present a normal family to the outside world, for Ryan, for everyone else." His gaze held mine, steady, unyielding. "But between us, there is nothing." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "David, please, I'm not finished." My voice died in my throat. A divorce would destroy Ryan right now, he said, and it wouldn't look good for your job either. Each word was calculated, precise, controlled. So I'm giving you a choice. I stared at him, my entire body trembling. Say it, he said. My voice broke. I agree. The words tasted like something bitter and permanent. He nodded once. Then he stood up. Without another word, he walked into our bedroom. I stayed where I was, still on my knees, listening. Closet doors opening, fabric shifting, drawers sliding. A few minutes later, he came back out carrying a pillow and a blanket. He didn't look at me as he dropped them onto the couch. "I'll sleep here," he said. That was all. No yelling, no anger, no second chances. Just a decision. That night, I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of him shifting on the couch in the next room. I had expected chaos. I had expected pain. I had expected consequences. But I hadn't expected this. This quiet. This distance. This absence. And as the hours passed, one thought settled into my chest, heavy and inescapable. Some punishments don't come with shouting or tears. Some punishments come with silence, and they last a lifetime. The next morning, David made coffee like nothing had happened. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching him move around with the same quiet efficiency he had always had. He reached for the same mug, poured the same amount, added a splash of milk without measuring. Every motion familiar, practiced, unchanged. Except for one thing, he didn't look at me. "David," I said softly. No response. He picked up his mug and walked past me like I was a piece of furniture that had always been there. I turned slowly, following him with my eyes as he sat at the dining table, opened the newspaper, and disappeared behind it. That was the moment it became real. Not the night before, not the lake, not even the words he had said. This quiet, deliberate erasure. I forced myself to move, to act normal, because that was the agreement now, wasn't it? Normal. I made breakfast, eggs, toast, the way he liked it. I set the plate in front of him carefully, like I had done for years. "Eat before it gets cold," I said. He lowered the paper just enough to glance at the plate. "Thank you," he said, polite, distant. Then the paper came back up. That was the first time I understood something I hadn't expected. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was simply done. Ryan came downstairs a few minutes later, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning," I said, trying to sound steady. He didn't answer. He walked straight past me, grabbed a piece of toast from the counter, and headed for the door. "Ryan," I called, my voice breaking slightly. He stopped. For a second, I thought maybe he would turn around. He didn't. "Don't be late," he said, not to me, but to the room, and then he left. The door closed behind him, soft but final. I stood there, staring at the empty space he had just walked through, feeling something inside me shift in a way that terrified me. I wasn't just losing my husband. I was losing my son. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal if you didn't look too closely. David left for work at the same time every morning, came home at the same time every evening, ate dinner, watched television, slept on the couch. We spoke when necessary. Salt? On the counter? "Did you pay the electricity bill?" Yes. Short. Functional. Nothing more. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the empty space beside me, listening to the faint sound of him shifting in the living room. Sometimes I would almost get up, walk out there, sit beside him, try again. But I never did, because I knew. There was nothing left to reach for. At school, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled, I taught my classes, I graded papers, I laughed in the faculty lounge at jokes I didn't hear. Daniel stopped coming around. I sent him one message. "I'm sorry." "We can't see each other anymore." He replied with a single word, "Okay." Just like that, he was gone. Like a chapter that had been ripped out of a book, leaving the rest of the story intact but somehow incomplete. At home, the silence grew heavier. Winter came early that year. Cold seeped into the house in ways it never had before. The walls felt thinner. The rooms felt larger. Every space between us stretched further apart. Christmas approached. Normally, it was my favorite time of year. Decorations, lights, music playing softly in the background. That year, it felt like a performance. Ryan came home for break, but he stayed mostly in his room. At dinner, the three of us sat at the table like strangers forced to share a space. I tried. "Ryan, do you want more turkey?" I asked, reaching for his plate. He pulled it back slightly. "I'm good." He didn't look at me. "Class is going okay?" I tried again. "Yeah, one word." David kept eating. "David, how's work?" Ryan asked suddenly. "Fine," David replied, and that was it. Conversation redirected, clean, intentional. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, realizing something I hadn't been ready to face. They were still a family, just not with me. After dinner, Ryan stood up. "I'm going to my room." "Okay," David said. No one looked at me. The door closed again. That quiet click echoed through the house, settling into the walls like something permanent. I felt the tears before I realized I was crying. I wiped them quickly, embarrassed, even though no one was watching. "Stop crying," David said flatly from across the table. I froze. "Save your energy," he added. "We have to visit your mother tomorrow. Practical, controlled, unaffected." I nodded, even though he wasn't looking. And in that moment, something inside me finally settled into place. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something we would fix. This was my life now, a life where I still had a husband, still had a family, but somehow had lost both. By the time Ryan graduated, the silence in our house had become something solid, not uncomfortable anymore, not even noticeable most days. Just there, like a piece of furniture you stop seeing after a while. He finished his master's degree at 24 and took a job in Chicago. I remember standing in the driveway the day he left, watching him load the last of his boxes into the back of his car. "Call when you get there," I said. He nodded. "Drive safe." Another nod. I waited. For a hug. For something. It didn't come. He closed the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and pulled away without looking back. I stood there long after his car disappeared, staring at the empty street, feeling that same hollow space open up again. When I turned around, David was already inside. He hadn't come out to say goodbye. The house felt different after that. Colder. Bigger. There was no buffer anymore. No third presence to soften the edges between us. Just him and me. And the silence. I tried, at first. I really did. I learned how to cook his favorite meals again, the ones I used to make when we were younger. Pot roast on Sundays, lemon chicken with roasted potatoes, the blueberry pancakes he loved on his birthday. I would set the table carefully, light a candle sometimes, even though it felt foolish. He would sit down, eat, and say, "Thank you." Nothing more. One night, after I'd spent hours making dinner, I sat across from him and watched him eat in that same quiet, detached way. "You don't have to do this," he said suddenly. I blinked. "Do what, this?" He gestured vaguely at the table. The meals, the effort. My chest tightened. "I want to." He shook his head slightly, not unkindly, just certain. "We're just acting," he said. "You understand that, right?" The words hit harder than anything he had said in years. "But I want to make it right," I whispered. He didn't even pause. "Some things can't be made right." Silence settled again, thicker this time. "Laura," he added, setting his fork down, "I gave you a respectable way out." My stomach dropped. "Just live your life," he continued, "and don't make me regret my decision. Decision. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, a decision." That was when I finally understood something I had been avoiding for years. He hadn't stayed because he loved me. He had stayed because it was easier. Easier for Ryan, easier for appearances, easier than tearing everything apart. But whatever we had once been, it was gone. In 2013, Ryan got married. Her name was Emily. She was kind, warm, the kind of woman who smiled with her whole face. At the wedding, David stood beside me, his arm resting lightly around my back as we greeted guests. "Your parents are adorable," one of Emily's relatives said to her. "Still so in love after all these years." Emily beamed. "I know, right?" David smiled. I smiled. We played our roles perfectly. From the outside, we were exactly what people wanted to see: a long, successful marriage, a strong family, a love that had lasted decades. Later that night, when the reception ended and we returned to the hotel room, David's arm dropped the second the door closed. The silence came back instantly, like flipping a switch. "That was exhausting," he said, loosening his tie. I let out a small breath. Yes, it was. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. "David," I said quietly, "how long are we going to keep doing this?" He didn't hesitate. "Until we can't anymore." I looked up at him. "What does that mean?" He shrugged slightly, already walking toward the couch. "I'm used to it. Used to it." The words echoed in my head long after he had laid down and turned away from me. Used to the silence. Used to the distance. Used to a life where I existed just outside his world. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling again, just like I had 17 years ago. But this time, something was different. Back then, I still believed there was a way back. Now, I wasn't so sure there ever had been. The first time I felt something close to hope again, it came from a baby's laugh. Ryan and Emily had their son, Noah, a year after the wedding. I remember the first time we held him, how small he felt in my arms, how his fingers curled instinctively around mine like he already trusted me. David stood beside me, looking down at the baby with a softness I hadn't seen in years. "He looks like Ryan did," he said. It was such a simple sentence. But it was the first time in a long time he had spoken to me without being asked. I turned slightly toward him, careful not to move too fast, like I might scare the moment away. "Was Ryan this calm as a baby?" I asked. David nodded once. "Yeah, that was it. But it was enough. For a few weeks, maybe months, something shifted. Not dramatically. Not in a way anyone else would notice, but in small moments. We talked about Noah, about when Ryan was little, about things that felt safe. During video calls, we would sit side by side watching Noah babble into the camera, both of us smiling at the same time without thinking about it. Sometimes our shoulders would almost touch. Almost. And each time I felt that fragile, dangerous thought return. Maybe time could fix this. Maybe we weren't completely broken. I held on to that feeling longer than I should have, because it didn't last. Thanksgiving that year was the first time everything cracked open again. Ryan and Emily came to stay for a few days, bringing Noah with them. The house felt warmer with them there, livelier, almost like it used to. We sat around the dining table, plates full, the television murmuring softly in the background. Emily smiled at both of us. "You two are doing well, right? Health-wise, I mean?" "We're great," I said quickly, forcing a lightness into my voice. David nodded. "Fine." Emily looked between us, her smile soft, genuine. "I've always admired your marriage. Being together this long and still so close." The words hung in the air. For a second, I didn't know how to respond. Then Ryan's fork hit his plate. Hard. "Mom, stop!" he said. The room went still. Emily blinked. "What?" Ryan leaned back slightly, his expression tight, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that had been building for years. Don't say things like that, he continued, not looking at her. You don't know. Ryan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He ignored me. They're not like that, he said. They haven't been for a long time. Emily's smile faltered. What are you talking about? Ryan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. I should have told you before, he said. I just didn't want to make it real. Ryan, David's voice cut in, low and warning. But Ryan didn't stop. They've been pretending for years, he said. They don't talk. They don't sleep in the same room. They just act like everything's fine when people are watching. Emily stared at him, then at us, confusion turning into something else. Is that true? She asked softly. I couldn't answer. I could feel my throat tightening, my chest constricting, like the walls of the room were closing in. Ryan, that's enough, David said, sharper now. No, Ryan shot back, his voice rising. It's not enough. I've been living with this my whole life, watching you two pretend like everything's okay when it's not. His eyes flicked to me then, just for a second. And in that second, I saw something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. Not just anger, not just disappointment, resentment. Do you have any idea what that does to a kid? He continued. Growing up in a house where nothing is real? Ryan, I said again, but my voice broke. He shook his head. You think I didn't notice? He said. You think I didn't see the way you avoided each other? The way you never touched, never laughed together? Emily reached for his arm. Hey, it's okay. No, it's not, he said, pulling slightly away. It's not okay. Silence fell again. Heavy, suffocating. What's the point? Ryan asked finally, his voice quieter now, but no less sharp. Why keep doing this? Why not just get a divorce and move on? The word landed like a stone. Divorce. I felt my entire body go still. David stood up slowly. That's enough, he said again. Ryan didn't argue this time. He just sat there, breathing hard, staring down at his plate like he had said too much and not enough all at once. Dinner ended in silence. Emily cleared the table quietly. Ryan disappeared into the living room. David sat back down, finishing his meal like nothing had happened. I sat there, my hands shaking in my lap, one thought repeating over and over in my mind. He was right. Ryan was right. We weren't saving our family. We were suffocating it. And for the first time in 17 years, I started to wonder if staying had been the biggest mistake of all. By the time I turned 56, my body was the one thing I could no longer pretend was fine. The school district offered a health screening for retired teachers, and I signed up without thinking much about it. Blood work, imaging, routine checks, the kind of things you do when life slows down and there's no more noise to distract you. Everything looks good overall, the nurse said, smiling as she handed me the results. Maybe a little anemic, nothing serious. I nodded, relieved in a way that felt almost automatic, but something in me still felt off. So I made an appointment with Dr. Carter. She reviewed my chart carefully, her expression shifting as she clicked through the images. Laura, she said finally, her tone more measured now, I need to ask you something personal. I gave a small, nervous laugh. That seems to be a theme today. She didn't smile. Have you and your husband maintained a normal, intimate relationship over the years? The question landed exactly where it hurt. I hesitated, then shook my head. No. How long? 17 years. She leaned back slightly, absorbing that. 17, she repeated quietly, almost to herself. I watched her carefully, the way her fingers hovered over the keyboard but didn't move. Does that affect the results? I asked. Yes, she said. It can. Long-term lack of intimacy can lead to hormonal changes, tissue thinning, and other complications. I nodded slowly, trying to process it. I didn't know that, I said. Most people don't, she replied gently. Then she paused. But that's not the only reason I asked. Something in her voice made my stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" I asked. She turned the monitor slightly toward me, pointing to an image I didn't fully understand. "I'm seeing something here," she said. "Evidence of prior surgical intervention." My mind went blank. "Surgery?" I repeated. "No, I've never had surgery." She didn't argue. "Just studied me." "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked. "Yes," I said, more firmly this time. "I would remember that." There was a long pause. Then she sighed softly and removed her glasses, setting them on the desk. "Laura," she said carefully, "the imaging shows scar tissue on your uterus, not minor. This is consistent with a surgical procedure that happened years ago." I stared at her. The words didn't make sense. "That's not possible," I said. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned the screen fully toward me, highlighting the area. "You see this?" she said. "That's not something that appears naturally. This was done intentionally, and based on the condition of the tissue, it wasn't recent." My heart started to pound. "How long ago?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Many years," she said. "Possibly close to 2 decades. 2 decades." The number echoed in my head. 17 years. My breath caught. "That doesn't make any sense," I whispered. "Then we need to figure out what does," she said gently. "Is there any chance you were hospitalized during that time? Any incident where you might not remember everything?" And suddenly, a memory surfaced. Faint. Blurry. But there. The months after, everything fell apart. The anxiety. The sleepless nights. The way my thoughts wouldn't stop racing. I had taken sleeping pills back then, too many one night. I remember waking up the next morning with a dull ache in my lower abdomen. I had brushed it off, told myself it was stress, hormones, anything but something real. "Laura?" Dr. Carter's voice pulled me back. I was hospitalized once," I said slowly, "after I took too many sleeping pills." Her expression sharpened slightly. "How long ago?" 17 years, I said. The room went very still. "Do you remember what happened at the hospital?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not really. They said I was fine, that I just needed rest." She nodded, but her eyes told me she didn't believe that was the whole story. "Laura," she said carefully, "I think you need to talk to your husband." My chest tightened instantly. "Why?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Because if this surgery happened during that time," she said, "there's a very strong chance he knows about it." The words settled into me slowly, heavy, cold. 17 years of silence, 17 years of punishment, and now, something else. Something hidden, something I had never even known existed. I stood up on unsteady legs, my mind racing. "Thank you," I said automatically. She gave me a small, concerned smile. "Take your time with this, but don't ignore it. Ignore it." I had spent 17 years ignoring things, pretending things weren't broken, pretending silence was normal. But this wasn't something I could pretend away. As I walked out of the clinic, the sunlight felt too bright, the world too loud. One thought repeated over and over in my head, louder with every step. What did he do? And more importantly, what else had I never been told? I didn't call him. I didn't wait until dinner. I went straight home and asked him the second I walked through the door. "David, I need you to tell me the truth." He was sitting in the living room, reading like he always did at that hour. The same chair, the same paper, the same quiet. But when he looked up and saw my face, something shifted. "What is it?" he asked. "In 2008, did I have surgery?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. For a second, he didn't react. Then the color drained from his face. It happened so fast, it almost didn't seem real. One moment, he was calm, controlled, distant. The next, he was standing. the newspaper slipping from his hands and hitting the floor. My heart dropped. That was all the answer I needed. "You did," I said, my voice shaking. "I had surgery, and I don't remember it." He turned away from me, his shoulders rising and falling like he was trying to steady something inside himself. "David," I said, stepping closer. "What happened?" Silence. "Tell me," I pushed, louder now. He let out a long breath. "Do you really want to know?" he asked, still facing away. "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. Then he turned around. His eyes were red, not from anger, from something deeper. "That night," he said slowly, "after I found out about you and him, you took too many sleeping pills." The memory flickered again, blurry, distant. "I rushed you to the hospital," he continued. "They pumped your stomach." My chest tightened, and while they were examining you, his voice faltered for just a second. "They found something." I felt the air leave my lungs. "What?" I whispered. He looked at me. "You were pregnant." The world tilted. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. "Pregnant?" "No," I said immediately. "That's not possible." He let out a hollow, broken sound that almost resembled a laugh. "They said you were about 3 months along," he said. 3 months. My mind raced. 3 months David and I hadn't been intimate for at least 6 months before that. Which meant, "Whose baby?" I asked, though I already knew. His eyes filled with something raw and unbearable. "You tell me," he said. My legs gave out and I sank into the chair. Ethan. It had to be Ethan. I had been carrying his child. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I swear I didn't know." David's jaw tightened. "I know," he said. "The words surprised me. You know?" I repeated. He nodded once, slowly. "You didn't know," he said. "You were unconscious when they told me." A cold dread began to spread through my chest. "And the baby?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "What happened to the baby?" Silence. The kind that feels like it's swallowing the room whole. "David," I said louder now, "what happened?" He closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like it was being dragged through something sharp. I had them terminate the pregnancy. Everything inside me went still. "You what?" I breathed. "I signed the consent forms," he said, "while you were unconscious." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. "You didn't have the right," I said, my voice shaking, rising, breaking. "You didn't. I didn't have the right," he snapped, the first real emotion I had seen from him in years exploding to the surface. "You were carrying another man's child," he said, his voice cracking. "What was I supposed to do? Let you wake up and celebrate it? Let everyone know my wife was pregnant with someone else's baby?" "That was a life," I said, tears spilling down my face. "And what about my life?" he shot back. "What about our family? What about our son?" The words hit me like blows. I had no answer, because he was right, in a way that made it worse. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, my voice collapsing into itself. "All these years, why didn't you tell me?" He stared at me. Long. Hard. "Because there was no outcome where that truth made anything better," he said quietly. "You would have hated me." "I wouldn't have." "Yes, you would have," he cut in. "You would have hated me for taking that choice away from you." My chest tightened. "And maybe," he added, his voice lower now, "you would have hated yourself even more." Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, full of everything we had never said, everything we had buried, everything that had been rotting underneath the surface for 17 years. "I know now," I said finally, my voice barely holding together. "I know what happened." He nodded once. "Yes," he said. Then he looked at me with something that felt like exhaustion more than anything else. "So what now?" he asked. The question hung between us, heavy, final. And for the first time since that night 17 years ago, I realized we had reached the point where silence was no longer enough to hold everything together. The word divorce had barely formed in my mind when the phone rang. David answered it, his voice sharp, controlled, but something underneath it shifted almost instantly. "What?" he said. I watched his face change, color drained, eyes sharpened. His grip on the phone tightened so hard his knuckles turned white. "Which hospital?" he asked. My heart stopped. "What is it?" I whispered. He hung up slowly, then looked at me in a way I had never seen before. "Ryan's been in an accident. Everything else disappeared. We didn't argue. We didn't speak about the past. We didn't even look at each other. We just moved." The drive to the hospital felt faster than anything I could remember, and yet every second stretched into something unbearable. "He'll be okay," I said over and over, my voice trembling. "He'll be okay." David didn't answer. His eyes stayed locked on the road. At the hospital, Emily stood outside the emergency room, holding Noah, her face streaked with tears. "Mom, Dad," she choked. He ran into the street. There was a little boy. Ryan pushed him out of the way. Her voice broke. "They said he lost a lot of blood." My knees almost gave out. David caught me without thinking. For the first time in years, he touched me. But it wasn't about me. "Where is he?" David asked. "In surgery?" Time stopped. Minutes. Hours. I couldn't tell. The waiting room lights buzzed softly overhead, and every sound felt too loud. Footsteps, doors opening, voices whispering. Then the surgeon came out. "He's alive," he said, "but he needs a transfusion. He has a rare blood type." "What type?" David asked. "B negative." We both froze. "I'm O positive," David said. "I'm O positive too," I added, my voice shaking. The doctor frowned slightly. "That's not possible," he said. "Two parents with type O blood cannot have a child with type B." The world tilted again. I felt it, that same cold, sinking feeling from earlier, but deeper now, heavier. "Are you sure?" David asked, his voice barely audible. Before the doctor could answer, a nurse rushed out. "We need a donor now." Emily stepped forward instantly. "I'm B negative," she said. "Take mine." Everything moved quickly after that. The transfusion, the surgery, the waiting, and then finally, he's stable. Relief hit like a wave, but it didn't wash anything away. It just made room for what came next. We were allowed to see him briefly. Ryan lay in the bed, pale, weak, machines beeping steadily around him. "Dad," he whispered. David moved closer. "I'm here," he said. Ryan's eyes shifted to me, then back to him. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. My chest tightened. "Not now," I said quickly. "You need to rest." "No," he said softly. "I've known for a long time." The room went still. "Knew what?" David asked. Ryan swallowed. "That I'm not your biological son." The words didn't just land. They shattered everything. I felt my breath leave my body, my vision narrowing, the edges of the room blurring. David stepped back like he had been struck. "What?" he whispered. "I found out in high school," Ryan said. "I saw my records. The blood type didn't match. I had a test done. My legs gave out. I gripped the edge of the bed to stay upright." "And?" David asked, his voice breaking. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. "The probability was less than 1%, he said. "You're not my biological father." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. David's face changed. Not anger, not even pain. Something deeper. Something that had been building for decades. "Who?" he asked, turning slowly toward me. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My mind raced, pulling fragments of memories I had buried so deeply I had convinced myself they never existed. A night before our wedding. Too much alcohol, a blur of voices, laughter, a room spinning, a face, Mark Collins, David's best friend, our best man. The realization hit me all at once. It was. Before we got married, I whispered. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. David let out a sound I will never forget. A broken, hollow laugh that didn't belong to the man I had known for 30 years. 28 years, he said. I raised another man's son for 28 years. Ryan's voice shook. Dad, you are my father. You raised me. You. But David didn't respond. He just turned away. Later that night, standing on the hospital balcony, he spoke again. I wanted to hate you, he said quietly. I wanted to destroy everything. The city lights flickered in the distance, cold and distant. But I'm too tired, he added. I stood there, unable to move. So this is what we'll do, he continued. For Ryan. For Noah. I already knew. In public, we stay the same, he said. We are a family. And in private, I asked, my voice barely there. He looked at me, empty. In private, he said, we are nothing. Not anger, not revenge, just nothing. And that was worse, because hate still means something. This didn't. It meant the end, not of the marriage, but of everything inside it. If this story made you feel something, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment 3 words. I feel this.